What are your thoughts and experiences with first local referendums, if you have any?
Yeah, so I've worked on a lot of both local and state initiatives and referendums. And my general view of them is that if democracy works correctly, we shouldn't need them. The people that we elect to office should be doing these things, but sometimes they don't. Um, I grew up in California where we've always had referendums, and sometimes you would have ballots where there are 20 different referendums you're voting on, and sometimes two competing ones. This last year in California, I mean, I live in Ohio now, but this last year in California, there was a referendum on forcing gig employers to pay healthcare and all of that stuff, like Uber and Lyft and these things. And then there was a competing referendum financed by Uber and Lyft to say the opposite. And of course that one won because they had all the money. They spent tens of millions of dollars on it. So the way the system can be perverted, even at the local level, is that a relatively small number of people can get a petition and get something put on the ballot in order to serve their special interest. Yeah. So that's I'm not for or against the referendum process. I just think so many of them are just corrupted. Everything comes down to money and politics.
Yeah. Like, if I remember correctly, 1978, a very notorious California state referendum, Proposition 13 it was called.
Yes, 1978 was a big year for initiatives here. In June of 78, Proposition 13, the Jarvis-Gann, they called it back then, that changed the way property taxes were collected in California and gave a huge advantage to people who owned a home then in June of 78. But if you bought a house right after that, you were going to pay higher taxes. So it was a boon to current homeowners, and it decimated local school districts, parks. And so you ended up then having to replace that money. And usually how they replace it in schools is doing away with art and music, making participants pay, making a kid pay $300 for his football uniform, or whatever, those things that used to be funded by taxpayers.
Yeah.
And then in late 78, in November of 78, I worked on a campaign that was run out of San Francisco supervisor Harvey Milk's camera store. Yes. And that was to overturn the Briggs Initiative. So the Briggs Initiative would say that gays and lesbians could not teach in public schools. And when the campaign started, it was heavily favored. So I worked on that campaign and worked primarily in straight Catholic neighborhoods, trying to remind these people that this is about discrimination. It's not about sexual exploitation of children. It's about one group just discriminating. And in fact, a week before the election, Ronald Reagan came out against the initiative, and that's really what swung things. That kind of gave permission for other, straight whites and Republicans to vote against it. And then coincidentally, it was about 3 weeks after we won that when Harvey Milk and the mayor of San Francisco were assassinated at City Hall. So that was quite a crazy time.